Hello, welcome to the January 21st, 2025 Haldane Board of Education workshop meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, roll call and then I'll do the other stuff.
Okay. President Clements,
Here?
Vice President Valentine,
Here.
Trustee McNow,
Here.
Trustee Clemenson.
Here.
All right, so before we approve the agenda, I'm going to make a motion to add something to the end instead of going directly from the superintendent's final thoughts to adjournment. I'm moving that we add a plan to go into executive session. Yeah, and I'll give more information about it when I make the motion to go into executive session. May I have a second?
Second.
All right. So then I guess actually now I just need a motion to approve the revised agenda. Will you please read the recommended action?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as discussed.
You have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
This evening, we'd like to start the meeting with a moment of silence for Carol Filmansky. We learned today that she passed away after a 2-year battle with cancer. It really struck a very sad note for me, I'm sure for many of us, because Carol was such a central part of so many of our children's lives and our lives in her 20-year service as the elementary school secretary. And then she also served such an important role in the district because she was also the CSEA union president for a long time. So if we could just have a moment of silence, please, for her. Thank you. The only other comment I had is I know that whenever there's a snowstorm, it requires a significant amount of effort on the part of our maintenance staff. I believe almost always outside of normal working hours. And as I was walking here this evening, I thought the campus looked really nice, and you could tell that people, had worked hard so that we could open safely today. So thank you for that. And that's really all I have.
Just a few updates for the board and the community. First, Haldane's regionalization plan has been submitted to state ed. I want to thank Josh Elder, who really did the bulk of the work. That the state asked for a lot of data. Some of that data the state had, but we had to reorganize it. We went back, in some cases, 10 years to do some historical data, looking at trends, enrollment, student performance, real comprehensive plan, about 42 pages. I worked a little bit on the narrative portion of it. The state did ask us, what are we proud of? What are the strengths of our district? Things like our student performance. I also talked about, despite being a smaller school district, how we strive to offer a wide range of advanced placement courses and electives and extracurricular programs and athletic programs. And I am very impressed, as someone who's only here 6 months, a district this size to offer so much to so many. But of course, there's always things that we would like to improve upon and expand upon. So I did list a number of things that we would like to continue to expand our special education programs, look at additional opportunities potentially to partner, our plans for a STEAM program for our capital project. Also, just looking at different goals, like our goal to reduce carbon emissions, become a greener school district, electric buses. But of course, the support that's needed are funds. And we've talked about this many times. So I was very deliberate about including that, because we are told that our BOCES, we're going to have regional conversations, but also at the state level, and things that we could use support with to achieve some of these goals, hopefully are part of the discussions that will take place in a few months. Any questions about that?
Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Also, just to give you an update, capital project planning. You may recall we've established 6 stakeholder groups: a student center group, a STEAM and innovation lab group, general classroom group, art classroom, a different group for safety, security, site work, and then for the student support offices. And on all of these groups, we have administration, we have teachers, counselors, various different stakeholders, all working with the architects and project managers. So each one of those subcommittees met. Now we are doing monthly meetings with the owners, which we are the owners, but with the architects and the project managers. They're going to take all that input and information that we gave them, and they will start to develop schematic design. So this gets really exciting. Also planned are some site visits. We won't be able to send the entire stakeholder group, but we envision probably 2 or 3 key people from each stakeholder group going out, looking at some work that CS Arch has done. They've recommended a few different school districts that have recently completed projects and with great success. And we also are aware of some districts in our region that have some model programs. So that's the next step, and then to give that feedback. But on those visits, speaking with teachers who are living in the spaces, who recently went through this process, is extremely valuable. So we're being really thoughtful about it. And this Thursday is our next owners meeting, and we'll continue to give updates. And it's very exciting to see it moving along. Lastly, I just wanted to, the board may be aware of this, but earlier today, Governor Hochul did, there's one more there. She did reveal her 2026 executive budget plan. There was a big press conference. I just copied the 3 or 4 pages pertaining to education. I will say that there's no real big news. There are no surprises in the educational piece of it. The governor's been talking about many of the things. One thing is foundation aid. Catherine and I had just a brief conversation because this just came out hours ago. It looks like they did take some of the advice from that Rockefeller Institute study. They've updated, looking at poverty in school districts. They were using data from 2020, which was really, it was time to use a new formula. So they are using more current data there. Also, they're doing a way to determine poverty or socioeconomic need was how many students in every district applied for free and reduced lunch. It wasn't the most accurate system. It was in place forever, as long as I can remember, but the Rockefeller Institute did recommend different statistics, and the state did or is using it starting this current school year. The governor, there was some fear that foundation aid would be cut back. A positive thing is that every district in New York State got an increase, but some were held to a 2% minimum. And it does look like Haldane is held to that 2% minimum based on socioeconomics and a number of different factors. Also in the budget, the governor has been talking a lot about cell phones. There's 13.5 million, which is the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. But to support districts, I think we have a good system in place, but things such as pouches and cubbies and other infrastructure. And it sounds to me like the governor, reading between the lines, is going to allow schools to have some discretion. And it won't be this ban from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., but sort of what we already have in place, which is no cell phones during class time. But when students, if they lunchtime or if they have an open campus for our seniors and juniors, they will be able to access their phones. And so it looks like it's going in that direction. And personally, I think that's wise. Also, another new thing, which is kind of interesting, we offer, I mentioned earlier, a lot of AP courses and other courses that actually many of our students graduate and have college credit. for those who have economic needs, the state is going to pay, it seems, within this budget, if it's approved, they will pay for those courses so students can graduate Haldane and have some college credit as they move on to college, which is very, very helpful. So some positives, but I don't see any other major changes. But I did share it with the board for their review.
The universal free school meals, that's new.
That is somewhat new, and Catherine, you can speak to it. During the pandemic, I believe.
It was,
It
right,
started?
for 2 years it started, and then
Yeah.
it went back, you had to
Right.
meet a certain community eligibility
Right.
profile, which we have not been able to meet to offer it to everybody.
Right.
But with the governor's proposal, she is proposing that every school district is able to offer free and reduced to all students.
I would imagine,
All
and
students.
is the idea that that would go into effect in 25, 26?
That's my understanding.
So I wonder if there, I mean, just because I know the cafeteria is always, that fund is always, it's challenging. It'll be interesting to see what the impact is.
Right, and the reimbursement that you would receive for
Yes.
that process, exactly. And we don't have any details on that yet.
Yeah, all right.
We still control our cafeteria, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so.
Oh, and in a great way. I mean, Maggie and I met briefly with Nancy Norton, and we talked briefly about it last spring. But that woman's knowledge of how to feed children, and I'm sure all of her staff, was so impressive. You know, it was really, we were so fortunate to have her and that whole team. It's great. Yeah. Well, I did not, my attention was elsewhere, but this is really useful to have. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. So as the board probably knows, the next steps are the Senate and the Assembly look at the governor's budget. They make counter proposals, and Albany goes back and forth. But with this, I mean, overarching good news is it seems like revenues are up. So there is, while there's not a lot of extra funding for education, it seems like there are some new things that are positive. And it seems like in other areas as well, like healthcare and law enforcement and infrastructure. So, hopefully it's a relatively smooth budget process. And if it comes in on time, we'll have more data for you when we start our budget presentations.
Thank you.
That's all for this.
All right, so we're lucky today to have one of our student advisors here to give a monthly report from the students. So Lincoln Wayland, sophomore class president, will you come up and you can write
Yeah, we
it.
have
Take the
Okay.
podium.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So, there's been plenty of new stuff happening with the student body. For instance, just on Friday, the independent student-run newspaper, the Haldane Outlook, released its second issue on January 17th, and the online version was made available yesterday. Some front-page articles included an article by editor-in-chief Kira Shanahan about the students' reactions to the 2024 election. Another one was by myself and news editor Tess Hereford about the struggle of students and faculty to combat hunger in the community, and an article by Luis Ferreira, a senior, about coping with college rejection. This year, the newspaper is funded by a combination of the Haldane School Foundation grant, a small portion of the school budget, and the generosity of a few local parents. And the school has agreed to continue funding into 2026. The official Haldane newspaper's third issue will come out in early April. The Haldane Debate Club, the Blues Devils Advocates, headed by debate co-captains Kira Shanahan and Mark Furpo, will compete in the Regional Ethics Bowl competition at Manhattanville College on February 1st. There, they will split into teams and take turns analyzing different moral cases and trying to form the strongest moral argument, for they are questioned by a panel of 3 judges. Last year, the debate club came in second place in the regional contest, behind the Paraclete Academy. Additionally, the Haldane Literary Magazine, co-presidents Kira Shanahan and Helen Hutchison, as well as Henry Shimming and others, were honored with the Young Writers 2024 Creativity Award for having a piece published in the Young Writers Anthology. They submitted 100-word horror stories at the Fright Club 100-word story contest. 3 of the short stories were also featured in the first issue of the Haldane Outlook. Finally, rehearsals have begun for a Haldane Dramas production of Into the Woods, which will be performed on March 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Leads include Oliver Petkiss as Baker, Amelia Allion as Baker's wife, Sophie Koch as Cinderella, Lucius Bell as Jack, and Nadine Allion as Little Red Riding. Thank you.
So much. Do you mind see if anybody has any questions? Yes. Does anyone have any questions?
I do have one about your article that was in the paper regarding hunger in our community.
Yes.
What type of research did you do for that, and how did you find some of your numbers?
So the article was kind of split into 2 parts. The first was interviewing a couple of students who volunteer at the Phillipstown Food Pantry and talking about their experience there and how they help out. And the other half was interviewing Nancy Norton and talking about all the stuff that she does to help make sure students get the food and nutrition that they need.
Great, thank you.
That's great. The paper, would you say the paper is very impressive? What do you think, what's the time commitment? I mean, it just seems like it's a lot of, I'm looking for a cough drop while I'm listening to you.
Yeah, it's,
I mean, do you think?
If you are the part of the, what we call the executive editors, which are like copy editors, the photo editors, the managing editor, which is my job, and the editor-in-chief, which is Kira. Especially towards the end, it's a really huge time commitment. So right now we have 2 print meetings. I believe it was the 2 Tuesdays leading up to last Friday, where we just spend like the full 8 hours after school till like 10:30 at night trying to get it all together. And so far we've always ran a little bit over time. And so last Wednesday we also had a pretty long meeting to take it all out, but we're ready for just 2.
And I believe there's been support from the Current as well. Is that right?
Yes, they lent us their office space and they distribute some copies to the wider community.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, this is a great night for a great presentation. You're more than welcome to stay. You are also welcome to leave with no questions.
Definitely.
That's right.
Don't worry.
It's going to look the other
We
way.
won't take it personally.
Not offended.
Unless you're going to be reporting on us unfavorably, in which case.
So this is the night of
Don't frighten me.
of some great presentations as workshop meetings often are. And so now it's time for us to hear from Dr. Selke with the middle school visit summary and detailed report. And so just to get started, and I'll wait and save my longer comments till afterwards. But again, as a reminder, as part of this effort, in advance of a building leader's presentation, 2 board members visit the school and spend a couple of hours getting to visit classrooms. And Michelle Cupper and I were at the middle school recently, and it was really great. And so I guess I'm actually also going to move so I can see your presentation. And you're going to sit down in your seats.
Yes, thank you, President Clemens. And good evening, Mr. Albano, the Board of Education. Thank you for inviting me to highlight the middle school tonight. I love talking about the middle school and what a special time it is. And I'm very proud of our students, faculty, and staff. And thank you also, President Clements and Trustee Cupper, for coming to the school. We had a really good time when you visited. We started with a panel of students, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and we just had a fun conversation about what the students' favorite subjects were and why, and then what kind of programming they would add, which I'll talk about a little bit further on in the presentation. So we visited a bunch of different classrooms. I think all of the core classrooms save for two, which was Mr. McConville and Mr. Keating, because with the new aligned schedule, they are shared with the high school. They were teaching at the high school at that time. So it was, I think, a very productive visit. So thank you for that. So
if you click, yep, there you go.
Oh, good. So I realize that the board is aware of the structure of the middle school, but for the sake of anybody in the community that's watching that maybe doesn't know, I just wanted to highlight that we are currently organized grades 6 through 8, and team teaching and interdisciplinary student-centered teaching are at the heart of what we do at the middle school, and really very much age appropriate for the middle school learner. So I just wanted to show that structure. So I designed this presentation based on the questions that President Clements and Trustee Cupper had after the visit. In previous years, I based the presentation on the middle school goals. There's some overlap, but I wanted to make it high interest for everybody that was present. So one of the things that is a very big deal that Ms. Sniffen and Ms. Jamin and I worked on all year last year, and we have rolled out this year, is an aligned secondary schedule. So the middle school schedule is now operating exactly on the high school schedule, and the elementary schedule is on a 6-day cycle that aligns with the secondary schedule. And what this allows for is for us to utilize faculty more efficiently, as I just mentioned, and also utilize space more efficiently. And I know it's a recurring theme that space is an issue. So this being on the same schedule allows for that to happen. For example, last year when we were on all 3 different schedules, if there was a high school class scheduled in room 102, like Mr. Crow teaches both middle school and high school in this building in room 102. The high school class rotated in the afternoon and the middle school didn't. So if there was one high school class scheduled in the afternoon, that room could not be utilized because the middle school schedule didn't rotate. So now those issues are solved because we're on the exact same schedule. Students have increased access to electives such as careers in science and Model UN. Academic core block scheduling and dedicated homerooms were retained at the 6th grade level, and all grade levels maintained team time, because that is at really the core. If you don't have time to plan as a team at the middle school, then you can't deliver interdisciplinary instruction, and you really can't function to support students the way that you can when you have team planning time. So that was retained. And we're in the process now that we're halfway through the school year. All the administration is in the process of collecting feedback from the different departments and from teachers on the rollout and the implementation of the aligned schedule, because it's impossible to just anecdotally look and see how it's working, because it hits each faculty member differently based on whether they're in 1 building, 2 building, or 3 buildings, what they teach. So we're collecting that information so that if there's anything that needs to be tweaked, or if we can increase interdisciplinary collaboration or add dedicated homeroom time for 7th and 8th grade next year, that will make those improvements as a second phase of the aligned schedule. So we're really excited about that. And just this is a nice place to talk about some of the electives that the students said that they would love during the visit, because these are electives that now faculty that we currently have, if we're able to utilize our faculty more efficiently, they may be able to develop and teach some of these wish list electives in the future. So the kids asked for a political science class. They asked for an extended biology and extended social studies classes, an architecture class, a drama class, and an extension of languages, which we're really excited because we, over the last 2 years, have already extended language. Prior to the hiring of Madame Tanner, the language exposure began in 7th grade. Now students have exploratory French and exploratory Spanish in 6th grade, and Madame Tanner pushes into 4th and 5th grade and does language lessons in the elementary school. and including Japanese, American Sign Language, Spanish, and French. So it's really a nice expansion of our language, and the kids want even more. So that's good. So one of the things that I think President Clements and Trustee Cupper noticed as they were walking, and I certainly was excited to point out, and one of the reasons why I love Haldane Middle School is because you very rarely are going to go into a class and see students lined up in rows with a teacher in the front teaching at students for any extensive period of time. That may occur. There may be some direct instruction for a mini lesson, 10 to 15 minutes, but most of the instruction is delivered in a progressive fashion. So student-driven learning methods include project-based learning, choice boards, opportunities for the application of acquired knowledge to real-world situations. And together with a student-centered approach, students pace and assess their own learning. It's one of the conversations I love having with our teachers when we do our pre and post observations to say, how are the students being assessed for this? And oftentimes I hear, well, they're going to read each other's work, or they're going to comment on each other's feedback during the Socratic seminar, or whatever the collaborative model of teaching that's going on is. So another thing that is something to be really highlighted and proud of is the interactive science lessons and labs that are going on in our science classrooms. We adopted the full option science system as a curricular resource, and our science teachers have really made that their own and have gone above and beyond to make labs very interesting and interactive for students. Research and debate, multi-phase interdisciplinary projects like the civilization project in the 6th grade. All of these things maximize student agency and help our students reach the Haldane essentials of critical thinking, collaboration, and problem solving. So proud of that and highlighting that. So another hot topic has been science of reading and literacy in classrooms. And as we were walking through for the visit, hope you don't mind me mentioning, President Clements was talking about, college professors that you've spoken with that were concerned that students don't have the stamina that they used to have for reading entire texts, that perhaps schools had shortened reading to excerpts, and students weren't going through, really meaty, lengthy reading exercises. And that's not the case at Haldane Middle School. I'd say that's not the case at Haldane K-12. Our students are very much readers, and there are a lot of very organic, naturally embedded reading opportunities that are almost recreational reading opportunities, like there's a Booktober contest in our 7th grade reading class where the students competed against there's 3 sections of 7th grade ELA, and they had a competition to see how many books that each section read. And the section that read the most books, they got bragging rights, and I think they got like a pizza party or something like that. Our book week is another example. Our community read is another example. But even without those additional recreational reading opportunities that our kids really take advantage of strongly, just even in our ELA classrooms, we read class novels. There's also choice. There's independent reading time and independent reading books. So all of that is happening, and is really fun to see kids talking about what they're reading and walking around with their independent reading, their IR books. So in addition to that, all of our ELA reading and special education teachers took the professional development on the science of reading and take a literacy approach that includes application of those core principles, such as phonics, vocabulary, and fluency. This teachers really focus on building background knowledge for students and, priming the pump and what students already know as they embark upon a new text. Explicit teaching of vocabulary, including the Greek and Latin roots of words, and close reading strategies, including self-monitoring of one's own reading, are included. So I just figured that I would talk about that because I think sometimes elementary school gets the bulk of the attention about literacy, and I wanted everyone to know that we are still actively working on literacy, both reading and writing skills in the middle school. So earlier on, Mr. Haldane was talking about the regionalization study and all of the AP courses that we offer, and acceleration begins in the middle school. And one of the things that we are working really over the past decade to do is increase the pathways for students to accelerate and throw away the old model of the old idea that is not just from here but from everywhere of it's a gateway that you have to pass through to get into accelerated classes or AP classes, but rather it's a pathway that your educators are helping you walk on so that you get acceleration. So the way we are set up right now, students have the potential to leave the middle school with 3 credits for the high school, credit in science, credit in math, and a credit in language. So we're working on expanding the opportunities, especially for students to take living environment. I think that you heard from Mr. Elder and Mr. Obama throughout the school year about the research and other local schools, including Garrison, that have gone to a living environment model for most, if not all, students. And also the fact that our students do really well on the living environment exam when they take it. So we're talking about 100% mastery, and they do well on the Science 8 exam as well. So, and those exams require strong readers, and one of our greatest strengths are the fact that our students are readers. So there's a lot of data that indicates that our students would do well if taking living environment in the 8th grade. So we're working on looking at that and what supports would need to happen in order to have that be our projection and process, and that would then allow for students to take expanded selection classes in the high school. So we want to make sure that our kids have that opportunity. And last but certainly not least, looking into the future, we rolled out the school alignment this year, and for the 26-27 school year, the administration is hard at work on figuring out a school reconfiguration that would allow the 5th grade to become part of the middle school. And it's not as simple as just, marching those classes over, collecting them, even though we're in the same building. There's a lot of considerations to think of to make the middle school model appropriate for a younger learner. So the reconfiguration will be very beneficial, especially as enrollment drops. It'll allow for a 5-6 split team, which means that the teachers are shared. And that makes sense as the enrollment goes down, that you would have one team of teachers for 2 grade levels because the enrollment is smaller. It would allow for a 7th, 8th grade split team. And it would allow for more of those elective classes to be taught. And then if there was a bubble year where we have all of a sudden a class of 70 come through again, we've retained all of those excellent teachers. And those years, maybe we wouldn't offer as many elective selections because we would have to have teachers going back into a larger number of sections for the core classes that they teach. But it would build in that flexibility. And it also enhances the utilization of space just in the same way that the aligned schedule does. So early planning about operating on the same schedule, and this is very early on, would include modifications to accommodate the unique needs of the younger learners, the 5th graders. For example, less rotations, reading class every day, core academic blocks, and a 5th, 6th grade dedicated lunch and recess. So in other words, the 5th and 6th graders wouldn't have lunch and recess with the 7th and 8th graders. That would be something that we would be looking to do. I think in other communities, I've reached out to Croton, for example. When Croton reconfigured their middle school to include the 5th grade, one of the biggest hurdles they had to climb was the fact that there was concern in the community about the younger kids being with the older kids, 5th graders being with 8th graders. One of the wonderful things about Haldane is we're all together right on top of each other all the time. So K-8 is already in the same building. The high schoolers, it is not an uncommon scene to see, high schoolers and first graders walking down the staircase together down to the, the lower levels. So we don't, on the late bus, the middle schoolers ride the late bus with the elementary school students, and there's a system in place for all of that. And there's a lot of respect. It's really something really special between our older students and our younger students. Just another lovely example of that is during our student council wellness week, our kids, our middle school students, sign up during 10th period, which is their free time. They could either stay and study or they could leave, school is dismissed. They sign up to read to the elementary kids. So a lot of that stuff is already happening. So we don't have that, the administration doesn't have that hurdle to climb, that kind of like bringing all the kids together hurdle. That is already in existence. It's more like the structural, systematic, how is the schedule going to work? How is how many kids can the cafeteria accommodate, kind of thing. Like those are the things that we need to work on, and we're working on it. So during the spring, the planning committee of teachers and administration will look over different possible schedules and also make some visits to neighboring schools that have successfully made the reconfiguration from 6-8 to 5-8. So we're excited for that work and next step in the process. Questions?
I'll start with that. You were talking about, are you talking about actually getting rid of Science 8 and everybody takes living environment, or is it just expanding living environment to a bigger pool of students?
So I don't think you could ever get rid of Science 8 because there's going to be classes where it's appropriate to offer a section of Science 8. So it's the goal of having as many students accelerate with the science as possible. Some years that may be all students. Some years there might be a section of Science 8, if it's appropriate.
So just on, so we, talking about science, but on math, so they take algebra, right? And that's also, that's kind of a share, that's accelerated. Is there opportunities, because you have a shared schedule, and just if this ever came up, I don't know. If there's ever, is there an opportunity for a student, let's say they went to like a different school and they rolled in and they needed, they had already been accelerated into math, but they're in middle school or whatever. Is there a way, or is there an ability, because they are now on the shared schedule, for let's say a kid who's in 8th grade who's already taken Algebra 1 to take a high school class, or is that just something that's not what we would think about?
Yeah, the answer is yes, that we have that ability. And as a matter of fact, one of the reasons why we felt strongly about aligning the schedule is because that had happened. That had happened a couple of times. And we actually had a student in middle school before we aligned the schedule go up to take geometry at the high school. And, that student had such impeccable student skills that he was able to manage the fact that he was missing some of his afternoon classes in order to go up. And it was lucky that geometry was offered in the afternoon that year that he needed it, because if it was offered in the morning, he wouldn't have been able to take it, because the way we were structured, all of the middle school core classes were exclusively in the morning. So it would have been much more problematic for him to miss a core class, a portion of a core class every time his geometry class met. So now, not only can students do that, if that's what is appropriate and what they need for their schedule, they could do it without missing. It could be scheduled in and it's aligned, and they could do it without struggle of missing a portion of a different course in order to do that.
Yeah, no, that's right. So the aligning of the schedule. So then if you track it even further down, right, which would then be 5th grade.
Yes.
Right. So you could, by aligning those schedules, there's just much more of a buffet of options for students across the board. So it would not just be in math, but it could be in language. It allows that, students to almost move,
more fluidly.
yeah, more fluidly through the schedule. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really an opportunity creator.
that's interesting.
I love the way you talk about, right, so often people talk about Algebra 1, as the gateway, this gateway class, and I like, instead of talking about, Algebra and living environment as gateway classes, but to think of them as a pathway that, instead of something students have to pass through, as a pathway that their educators are helping them walk onto. I love that, and I love the idea of, we know that the more advanced study students undertake, the more they learn. It's gonna offer some challenges, though, to make sure kids have enough science and math and other classes to take it, in high school. I mean, anecdotally, but like my son was running out of science classes to take it, at Haldane, and I think it's going to be this continual dance and balance of finding efficiencies, maintaining a really healthy program, but really, even though we are small, and it's possible with some classes that maybe even a little bit smaller, although we don't know that's going to be the case for certain, that we are going to continue to think about how to best expand the programming options. And I think, if you have a lot more students taking living environment in the 8th grade, there really is going to be a need for some other kinds of, and I don't just mean just AP classes, but more, rich science type classes, possibly. I'm not saying that we have to do that, but it's something for us to think about.
Yeah, I think it opens opportunities for students. Not only, I like to work with the mindset of students are in school exploring things, right? So it's not a race to get through the course catalog, right? But rather an opportunity to taste all of these different kinds of courses and see where the student might want to go. Because if a student finishes the sequence by 11th grade and their only option is to totally bridge in the 12th grade, for some students that's great, they're ready, they know where they want to go. For other students that could be very destabilizing for them if they don't know what they want to do. So I think that the high school course catalog is beautiful and gives a lot of opportunities for tasting different types of courses and different types of coursework that maybe aren't just laser focused on finishing the scope and sequence of whatever the content is, but rather meandering along to see what do I want to do, what interests me, where can I make a contribution.
Has there ever been any thought or discussion about starting accelerated math in 7th grade? I know that a lot of schools around us do that, and that's a question we hear a lot.
Yes.
And when you say accelerated, you mean offering Algebra 1 in 7th grade?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, when Judy Barbera was here, because she had such an extensive knowledge in the math scope and sequence through her years, it was something that we discussed a lot and looked into a lot of the findings. And I even started at the time having talks with the math department about the possibility of expanding the algebra offerings. Recently, we have slowed down on that track because other schools in the area that have gone to expanded acceleration in math are having some troubles with it. There seem to be some skill gaps that students are missing from not following the sequence.
Missing that 7th grade.
Yes. So there's ways to do it. I mean, Judy Barbera, who, for those who may not know, was kind of set the table for our director of curriculum and instruction role. There are ways to set out the math scope and sequence that minimize those skill gaps. So it's not something that's off the table, and it's something that we're certainly watching what's happening in the region, what other schools are doing, and where they're finding success, and where their students are struggling, so that as we move toward expanded offerings, we don't make those same missteps.
I just had one last question. That's okay. Sorry. Could you talk a little bit about what kids in middle school, what they're learning, what they do in the reading class, which is separate from the ELA? That was sort of something I wasn't expecting when I had a 6th grader. And it's taught, not all kids have the same reading teacher in a given year, so.
Yes, so, sixth grade is a little bit different because sixth grade reading is required. It's part of because sixth grade is technically still part of the elementary school, according to the state. The state classifies sixth grade as elementary school, so reading is required. At Haldane, we schedule students for seventh grade reading as well because we really have a lot of emphasis on reading. And the eighth grade students, it's an elective, but many students take the creative writing. I'd say most of our students leave the middle school having taken creative writing. During the reading class, students read whole group novels and they also have independent reading. They hold journals, they conference with their teachers about their reading, they make inferences, they follow quotes, it's another block of time to work on their literacy skills.
Is that standardized? Is that somewhat, I think the question Megan was saying, is that a standardized process, or is it just kind of like, basically like like a holistic reading type class? Like, how does that function?
So if the section is of lower skilled readers, they may use a particular curriculum called PAF, Preventing Academic Failure. So there is a section of that at each grade for students that are gap closing and maybe they're a grade or two below reading level, so they have very targeted instruction in their reading
Gotcha.
class. Otherwise, it's standard for the grade. And Kim McCullum is our humanities coordinator at the middle school. So even like, for example, in the sixth grade, there may be different teachers teaching the reading, but they're teaching it all under, with Kim McCullum's guidance. So they're all doing using the same curricular resources and the same structure for the reading.
Right. Okay. So it's not like an English class where like everybody reads this, whatever book across the entire grade. It's something different.
No, in the reading class, there's much more independent reading and choice.
Gotcha. Okay.
Whereas in the ELA classes, at every grade, there's class novels.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say quickly, I appreciate the focus on the reading in the middle school. To Peggy's point, there has been a lot of conversation about the inability of children to read. So it's great to hear that at Haldane, not only is the focus been on reading, but that children are reading. And from what you said, there is a culture of reading. And that, and when measured, we see that pan out. It seems like from what Josh has shown us as well. So we kind of have a decent arc going from elementary school through middle school to high school, where we're seeing significant success. So obviously, what's happening in the classrooms and what you're seeing is working. And I guess the only question would be, how do we make sure that's maintained going forward, especially and also when integrating the 5 to 8? Do you see that becoming kind of a stronger pathway or not? Like, would there be kind of a shared arc that you would see from 5 to 8, or is 5 going to be something like 1 to 5? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I get what you're putting down. Like, how are we going to be planful about keeping the focus on literacy and really enhancing opportunities for our highly literate students to continue to grow, like in that.
Yeah, especially as we pull them, so then now they're in the middle school, right? And that, and seeing them from 5 to 8, that specifically that type of growth, is that going to change anything? Focus that you would have? Is
So
it?
That's for that reason. That's one of the reasons why the anchor period for reading. So we were trying to figure out, and this is much more scheduling than you probably want to hear, but we're trying to figure out what do we do, because we can't run 2 different schedules because then we lose our alignment, right? But if 5th and 6th grade are having lunch at a different time than 7th and 8th grade, then what are the 5th and 6th graders doing while the 7th and 8th grade are having lunch and recess? And that's why the suggestion is to put an anchor class of reading every day So their reading will be, when I say anchor class, meaning it doesn't rotate and drop the way the other classes do.
Oh, neat.
But for that 41 minutes a day, when the 7th and 8th grade are eating and having recess, every single day, the 5th graders and will be having their reading class. So that, and yeah, I'd have to work out the minutes. It's one of the configurations. We're in very early planning stages for scheduling for the configuration, but it would actually increase the 6th grade. If the 6th grade also have an anchor period of reading, it increases the 6th grade reading time, because the 6th grade currently has reading every other day on the pinwheel drop schedule. It doesn't turn out to be that much different, because in the pinwheel drop schedule, there's a 55-minute block, and this would be 41 minutes every day.
Oh,
So it's not as like extreme as it sounds, but there's a message that's sent with that. If that class is reading, that sends a message, right?
Sure.
That our anchor period every day is reading, because that's what we care about, and that's what we focus on, and that's what we do.
Yeah, sure.
We're readers.
Right. You put the time into it, you put the structure into it, and you would expect that then it would be used wisely that day. Yeah. Thank you.
This talk of scheduling just reminds me of when you all were talking about scheduling last year. I mean, it is just really the amount of work that the leadership team has put into thinking about scheduling to really benefit students and staff. And again, part of it is efficiencies and alignment. I mean, it's truly impressive work. The whole topic of reading came up because Marianne started the day or the morning, Michelle's in my visit, with this, which she referred to, with this group conversation. We were in the conference room, and just a group of really great students. And one of the students was talking about like how they have on Friday at the Straight 9 Day, how they have one of their English teachers has them read. And so that's when I brought up the issue. It was like, oh, like, do you know that all these adults are talking about the fact that like college kids show up at college and they can't read a book, they don't have the perseverance to read a book. And so we had that conversation, but it was so great. It was such an authentic, natural conversation to have, and the students were clearly very comfortable with Dr. Selke, and Dr. Selke clearly really, the students very well. And it was great to hear them talk about and really reflect on their academic experiences. What classes do they like? What would they like to see? And also even talking about their experience of the new schedule. Like it was, they were very fluent in talking about their educational experiences, which I found really impressive. And then Michelle is sick this evening and she can't be here, but she sent me some comments that she asked me to share, which was, that she really, like me, really enjoyed the day. And she was particularly impressed by the authenticity that she observed, both your interactions with the students, but also just like the activities that we saw in the classroom. She really appreciated, seeing the debates and the collaborative team algebra Jeopardy. And we saw a social studies class, snippet of a social studies class that was just very, very impressive. And, Dr. Selke talked about the the developmentally appropriateness of what they strive for. And it was great. So Michelle, the words interactive and authentic kept coming to her throughout the day. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
Since you can't be with us. Does anybody else have any?
I just have a quick.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Oh,
to jump.
no, you didn't jump in. It sounded like a wonderful summary. I apologize to.
No.
How dare you, Sean?
How dare you? It was just, since we discussed briefly whether or not the state was going to mandate a cell phone ban, I'm curious, just since middle school is the time at which a lot of kids are getting their devices for the first time, and those are also kids that are dealing with impulse control of one kind or another. And I'm just curious to know how much self-regulation of those devices are in place, or how much policing you have to do in order to keep them out of the classroom. It would be great to have a snapshot of how it operates.
Thank you for that question. And it's so funny. I mean, I chuckle a little bit that it's become such a big issue in New York, because for 8 years at Haldane Middle School, phones are off and away throughout the school day. Like it's just what we do. Like the kids do it. Of course, there's always a small percentage that will push that boundary, and then we have a process for that in the code of conduct. The first time they're warned and they go put it away. The second time their teacher sends it to the office, they pick it up at 2:15. The third time I call the parent. But there's very few kids that get to the third time. You know, they know that and I think that they, at the middle school level, because they do have such work to do developing the impulse control, I think they really appreciate that it's off the table, so to speak, literally and figuratively off the table, because they don't have to make that choice, because I think they know that they can't make that choice. The draw is too much. And then when they get to high school, there's more opportunity for them to make choices and to learn how, you know, what acceptable use is, and when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, because they have a little bit more of their neurons solidified in that, you know, decision-making area of the brain. So if Governor Hochul sticks to allowing it being a local decision, I'd be very happy with that, because our system really does work at the middle school, and I'd like to keep it.
That's great. That's great. That's an excellent question. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Peggy.
Well, you say I thought it was really good.
I mean, destroyed the entire flow of the
I know,
conversation.
I was like, yeah.
It was a great question.
Made it stand out. Yes.
Well, I tried. Anyway.
Thank you so much.
Well, and I feel actually really gratified, because at the beginning of the year, everybody was instituting these bans, you know, and I honestly, you know, called Julia to ask what was going on, and she said, so I guess it's actually a question, because we sort of talk about how well it is working. She's like, well, you know, each building leader decides what they want to do, and we institute these policies. And I think it's especially, you know, hearing that and more talk about it, to be reminded of what happens here and how it's working. I mean, I remember feeling proud sounds like such a stupid word, but like, you know, that the building leaders were like, we have our way of dealing with this, and it's really working, you know, it's really working for us. And it's different at each building. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, another presentation on a really important topic, which is the volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker text exemption amendment. And I'm not going to move all the way again. I'm just gonna,
It is there. If you slide up, you can probably get out of this. Grab the other tab. Yeah, he's like, can you see? No. Where's the current mouse? To the right. Oh. Might be hard on the glass. It's hard in general. It's down here. Oh, there you go. Got it. A little more. This one. Yep. Okay. Can you?
It's just not really wanting to cooperate.
This glass isn't great.
Here?
Slideshow. Yep.
Okay, there we go. Even with glasses, that was bad. Sorry about that. Okay, we are going to kind of go back to remember where we were this time last year. We first started talking about the possibility of approving a volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker exemption. Just so everyone remembers what it's all about. Local governments and school districts can opt to grant a reduction on the amount of property taxes paid by volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. The maximum allowable exemption is 10% of the assessed value of a residential property. Last year in February, we approved a 5% exemption. Just as a reminder why we did that, there was no way for us to calculate the tax impact of what that would be. This is not a reimbursable tax exemption like our STAR exemptions are. This is an actual tax shift from one set of taxpayers to another. So we decided to start with a conservative number of 5%, just so it gave us a little time to know what the possible impact would be from taxpayer group to taxpayer group. The minimum service requirement that you have to be eligible for this exemption is from 2 to 5 years. We had the option for that, with an option to offer a lifetime exemption
after 20 years of service. We did approve the 2-year service requirement, and we did approve the up to the 10% lifetime exemption last year. So we did do as low a service requirement as we could, and for our lifetime exemption, we did go as high as we could last year. Just so you remember, changes to this exemption will require a public hearing and a Board of Education resolution. And one more time, it's just a reminder that it is a tax shift from one set of taxpayers to another. To be eligible for this benefit, the applicant must reside in the town or village which is served by their volunteer organization, and they must meet a minimum service requirement. You do have to be a property owner. You can't have someone reside in your home who meets the qualifications. You have to be, the volunteer has to own the property. And this exemption is only valid for residential purposes. And again, it can be exempt up to 10% of the taxable assessed value of the property. And again, lifetime exemption can be granted as long as that person maintains their primary residence within the school district. And benefits can be extended to unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. And as a reminder, we did grant that benefit last year. That benefit has to match the percentage that we give to, not for the lifetime exemption. So that right now for unremarried spouses is also at the 5% currently. I was able to run some numbers, and it all starts with knowing that we have approximately 3,000 taxable parcels in our school district. So for our 2024 school tax bills that were sent out in August and September, 19 parcels had applied for the volunteer exemption. By basing all of the numbers on our average assessment values, this added approximately $6 to each residential property. So it was shifted from your volunteers to the other taxpayers of $6 on their tax bill. We have looked at the new numbers for 2025 because town taxes have just come out. And right now we're anticipating that the 34 parcels that were eligible for town taxes will be eligible for our school taxes in September. So it is a little bit of a, well, it's almost double, but that potential tax shift, if we maintain it at our current 5% exemption level, would be a additional $15 to each taxpayer. If we do increase it to the 10% exemption level, which is what we're here primarily to think about, it would be approximately, again, based on average assessments and no real way to get down to the actual dollar, we're anticipating about $30 for every residential homeowner who is not eligible for this exemption. So what we need to think about is just, some decisions. Do we want to increase this exemption from 5% to 10%? And then do we want to maintain the 2-year minimum service requirement? The things that we could do, we can obviously go anywhere from 5 to 10, 10 being the maximum we can offer. And we could change the minimum service requirement if there was any desire to make it, anywhere in that 2 to 5 year. So that's kind of where we are tonight, with just kind of needing to talk these things through. And then our next steps, as we discuss this, is if we do decide to update any of the exemptions, a public hearing is required. We can hold that hearing at our next meeting, which is February 4th. After the public hearing, we could pass the resolution for each type of exemption. We are able to pass a resolution at the same meeting at which a public hearing is held. And so that could also take place on the February 4th meeting. And as long as we adopt it before any changes prior to March 1st, this new exemption would take place for our 2025 school tax bills. And that just is kind of an overview about where we are. And I don't know if you have any questions or if you want to discuss, but those are the decisions that need to be made prior to, so that, Megan and I know what to do for our February 4th meeting.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes,
This
thank
is
you.
exactly-
That was everything
Yeah,
we
it's-
needed.
we- I
Thank
feel
you.
like we had this presentation last year, which,
No, this is-
it's very helpful.
Yeah, no, and like, again, we weren't able to just because of the fact that we had no idea if it would be one parcel, 100 parcels. And, so that's why we took the baby step last year, and knowing that we'd be able to actually present numbers, after having a year of it.
Do you have any idea why there's such a discrepancy between the town and the school? From the 19 to the 34, did Maggie, did the Cold Spring Firehouse magically get tons of people? I don't think that's true, right?
That
Or
could be-
maybe it just took people a while to apply.
Probably just being people
That's
who
a fair
are
point.
aware of it.
Yeah.
It is the same, from everything I can read, it's the same paperwork that you turn in regardless of whether you want it on your school or your town. So I believe it's just more people being aware of it.
And the town also has 2 additional fire departments, right, that they deal with, Continental Village and Pearson. So maybe they weren't thinking Haldane specifically, they were thinking townwide.
Oh, that's a great point.
And it's active duty volunteers beyond 2 years, up to 20, after which there's a lifetime exemption.
Correct.
And it is, they have the stewards within each house determine whether or not someone qualifies based on which was
Within
presented
the
to us
firehouse.
each
That is
house.
the way I understand it. I mean, obviously, we have to.
Yeah, I
For
recall,
Maggie
I'm
for maybe
recollecting.
possible
yeah,
additional information, but
Yeah,
the way it was explained to us is that you have to meet certain service criteria
Right.
within your firehouse or your ambulance corps to be
Right.
eligible for it.
Right.
Yeah, I think you have to attend a certain amount of calls, put a certain amount of time in.
yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah,
I think that word active is meaningful.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And again, the school has no say in that. We just get the, it's just given to us who it is. Like we don't see who has been approved or
Right.
not approved. We don't know who polices that. But we assume that it's being handled properly through the
Yeah.
Division of Real Property Tax Services.
Perfect. Thank you.
So what do we want to do?
Oh, I'm a 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I,
I
I,
mean, that was our assumption last year.
I think it's important, in honor of John Headland, who said this last year, to just point out what a strange position it puts us in as, elected officials serving, who are making determination about how other individuals in our community who also serve, how they are taxed. Just what a strange position that it puts us in. I'm glad to be able to, have a say in how we do or don't award the time and effort that folks are giving the community. I appreciate the opportunity. It's an odd situation we find ourselves in. So, and I'm all in favor of moving forward with it.
It's so helpful, right? Because at one point we thought it could be hundreds of people, right? I mean, and there was really, Dr. Benante, we made some very unusual in the moment adjustments, but Dr. Benante, and I think in the spirit, we followed, Catherine and Dr. Benante's recommendation to take I would say we were going to take a baby step. I'd say we took this toddler step.
Yeah.
That is true. Because we did in the moment adjust a bit. But I think it was fair to the taxpayers in general to be sort of prudent and thoughtful about this. And I think we can feel, reassured by this. So that's the full 10% for
Staying at the 2-year minimum.
staying at the 2-year minimum, and then applying it for the spouses, unremarried spouses.
So we'll get the resolution ready. Megan will publicize that we'll be having a public hearing. I mean, obviously, people will have the opportunity to come and talk about that. So if anything changes, we can obviously, I don't think anything would happen at the public hearing that would make us change our minds, but we will prepare that for our February 4th meeting.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm wondering, so somehow the word got out last time that we were having this public hearing. I don't know, because I feel like I want to let the same group of people know that we're having another public hearing. And it could just be as easy as calling the two firehouses. I mean, or maybe, because people knew. I mean, I don't remember.
Oh, I don't know, other than it's Cold Spring.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we are required to advertise our legal notices,
Right.
I mean, our public
Public
hearings. I
hearings.
don't know how much people generally pay attention
Right.
to that, but I
Right.
think that last year it was something that people were sort of watching for.
Right. Right. Well, you're connected to someone in the Cold Spring Firehouse.
Yeah, I have the names of the two presidents.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, if you want to do that, then why don't you send them to me and I think that makes sense for me to do it. To let them know that we're having a public hearing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I'll do that.
May I ask, when other districts have made the determination to go up to 10%, are we under any obligation to have a public statement about our rationale for doing so, about whether or not we're doing because of X, Y, or Z? Or I'm just curious to know what other districts
I
do.
don't
Or if it's
think
just
so.
something-
I mean, I think some districts.
Sounds like a quagmire. 10%, go, done.
Okay. Just curious.
A lot of districts went immediately to
That's what
the
I thought,
max.
right? Yeah.
There were a couple that did the same thing that we did, but everyone, we would be the
So I would
only
think.
district that's not in our.
Is it good? Okay. All right. So we're now at the point of the meeting where it's time for our first opportunity for communication from the public. The Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session was reserved for comments on special presentations and active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, we'd ask you to sign in and state your name for the record. Keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. And we would like you to know that we discourage disparaging remarks or the discussion of district personnel. While the board would not engage in dialogue, we would be listening and we'd ask you to leave your contact information so that I or Mr. Albano could follow up with you.
I have something to say.
Oh, all right. I thought I was just saying this. For
I don't
the
know
heck
if
of
it's
it.
not as public. I'm actually speaking as school business manager. But earlier in the meeting, you were talking about Nancy Norton and how great a job that she does down in the cafeteria. And in December, we had happens about every 4 years, our child nutrition administrative review. So it's a form of an audit of everything from service in the cafeteria to the handling of free and reduced applications, budget, soup to nuts. And Nancy, as always, prepared wonderfully. I worked very closely with her and little findings, but absolutely probably one of the cleanest audits you could ask for. And I just really wanted to make sure that the board was aware of how really wonderfully it went. It's not the type of audit that requires any board action. But no, I just wanted to just also highlight how great she did down there because they were impressed. You know, usually they'll watch an entire day of service to make sure everything is going properly. And they watch for a little while and they're just like, you guys know what you're doing. And the nutritional guidelines were being followed, the free and reduced was being followed, and just wanted to give a huge shout out to Nancy and her staff for the hard work that they put into
That's great.
the, so.
Do you find that exists as a benefit because it's in-house and we control it? It's not outsourced to.
I think it
company
could
or-
probably go either way. I think if it was outsourced, you'd be working with a giant machine that does it so routinely for so many different schools.
Yeah.
They'd have a certain,
I
so I
fear
think that
giant
it
machines.
honestly could go
Giant
either
machines
way.
to a history
But-
teacher.
But I feel that, Nancy, it's just such a source of pride for her. I mean, we are so lucky to have her running our cafeteria program because she had a lot of sleepless nights heading into it, really worried about. And we kept just saying, like, worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, you need to fix this, and we fix it. And it was really nice to see how really well it went. I mean, they anticipated being here, till 4 or 5, 6 o'clock at night, and they had us wrapped up by about 1 or 2 o'clock with a really, really good overview analysis of everything from that is involved in our cafeteria. And I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of how well it went.
Thank
and
you.
really commend Nancy and her staff.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
All right. So next we have an administrator information reports that everybody provided for us. And anything people want to reflect on?
I just appreciate them. They're
I do too.
so, for the most part, really detail oriented. And I don't know, you learn a lot of things, right? That's what we're here for. But it was a good batch this cycle.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it oftentimes, if I'm out and about and someone asks me about the school, I usually reference these documents as to what's happening and what people can be encouraged by. So I find them extremely helpful and useful.
Well, there, sorry, I'm trying not to cough. I think there's one thing actually that Maggie brought to my attention, but I'm gonna
No, that's fine.
highlight. Is that okay? Do you
Yeah,
want to?
no, go ahead, please.
I mean, I think Adam's report on the work around transportation, I thought that was so tricky and so thoughtful. And I know that Mr. Albano's been, working with that. I mean, transportation's always tricky. It's one of the places where the district, has the potential to find efficiencies. We've talked for a little while. I mean, I think we need to do a transportation study. I think we'll want to do it with our new superintendent, with the electrification of buses, but also just generally, reducing one's footprint is all about, reducing and reusing. And, it's not just buying new electric buses, right? Which I know is something that we need to do. And it just, for those watching, it was just an effort to deal with the tricky weather conditions on East Mountain Road, which is always a big challenge for transportation, thinking about using different size buses, possibly, having the families, instead of a bunch of bus stops, trying out fewer, just really being very proactive in solving a thorny problem, which we really appreciated. Yeah. And Maggie, I read this myself and I would have brought it up, but I will say that Maggie's the one that brought it to my attention. But sorry. Regina went out of the way in her report to note the number of students that attend non-public schools in the district, and the rate at which students, so people who don't know, when there's a non-public school in a district, that district is responsible for conducting the evaluations and the CSE meetings and overseeing the provision of special education services, or
Yes.
So just because a child is going to a non-public school doesn't mean it's the public school in that district is still responsible for that. And of course, taking care of the children in our district is something that we want to be doing, but it is an interesting phenomenon that the rate at which the district is doing that is going up a lot. And it occurred to me that, maybe that's something she wants to speak to, in her report later on this year. I mean, I assume there was a reason why she brought it up. And I would like to know,
There wasn't a lot of context around it, but it's just interesting
Yeah.
to hear about, that we're still responsible for them.
and I think it's
Provide
like,
services for them.
yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's something that I don't think people think about very often, And I would anticipate that Haldane is a good partner, for doing that work. And so I'm sure her team is working very hard. And so I think people would probably like to hear more if she thinks there's more we would like to know about.
Definitely. Yeah, it's an important statistic. You can see a dramatic increase in the number of meetings and evaluations and so forth. Yeah.
I mean, people, and Dr. Selke mentioned it a couple of times, people, and it's a representative reality that, we've had some small kindergarten class sizes. We certainly have a very full high school right now, but it doesn't mean that there's like fewer students in the community or it doesn't mean that the district's responsibilities are necessarily like falling off the cliff, because we're getting so small. I mean, education is a very complex endeavor these days, and the Haldane is very ambitious in how we're wanting to serve our students. So I appreciate that.
And yet we have a 11-to-1 teacher-student ratio. Student to teacher, it's 11, I think.
Sounds about
Pretty
right.
close,
I'd have
right?
to- I'd have to double check.
I mean, that's pretty tough to beat,
Right.
even in.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, I don't dismiss the importance of that. But I do want to bring up the fact that the district for several years is really trying to be mindful of the fact in that we want to have that it's both pedagogically appropriate and fiscally responsible for the district to make sure that at least in terms of the classroom sizes isn't too small, I think. So yeah, I mean, I guess the other thing is, Julia mentioned these really great arts things that are going on in the high school. I mean, the reports really are good. So we're going to move it to a consent agenda. Minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We have the committee minutes for the Technology Committee and the Code of Conduct Committee. And do just those two.
Mhm.
Right. Anything of note there?
I wasn't at the last technology meeting.
Okay.
Yes, that's-
I think Michelle's on the code of conduct. Yeah.
I think she is.
All right, consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
I think one of the things we definitely want to acknowledge here is 2 out-of-cycle grants from the Haldane School Foundation.
Mhm.
Is the Community Support Fund. This is their new endeavor, right? So just as a reminder, I think I'm not on the school foundation, so people should correct me if I'm missing something. But I think one of their goals is to really build a fund, that the Community Support Fund, so that in addition to funding specific projects, they can help offset the cost for students to have full participation for all students regardless of cost. And I think that's become a real priority for them. And
Yep.
this certainly comes through in these 2 grants.
Yeah, and I know that in talking with them, one of the things that was really important to them is that students are particularly able to take advantage of things that are sort of more canon events at Haldane, like those sort of hallmark things that you get to do when you look forward to certain class trips and some of the bigger, more meaningful experiences.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's so much appreciated. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Super impressive 5 student teachers coming into Haldane.
Bless you.
That's great.
Yes, it is.
One of whom was a Haldane grad, Alyssa.
Uh-huh.
Oh, really?
Alyssa Cavelli was a Haldane grad.
That's great. That's so exciting. I don't think there's anything else. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Unfinished business, superintendent search update. So we had our last focus group last Tuesday night. And it was really pretty well attended. I think the main thing I just want to give people, just remind folks that on February 3rd, we'll be meeting in executive session to review with PNW BOCES, both what they learned from the focus groups, but also to select the slate of semifinalists. And then the following week is when we're doing those interviews. So I just wanted to give people a heads up. It's probably going to take me a couple of days, but I'm going to send around questions, so some example questions. But I would encourage everybody to be thinking about the kinds of questions. Now then, we certainly want to hear from BOCES about the questions the
Right.
community wants us to ask as well. So we're not going to finalize our questions until after that. And so we will have to fit in there somewhere between that.
We have an extra week, remember, because that's
Of the break.
winter recess.
No, we're doing the semi-finalist interviews on the 12th and 13th.
Oh, okay. I was thinking we had winter recess as a gap in there.
No,
Okay.
there's a gap after that. But
Okay.
we decided to do the semifinalist
yeah.
interviews. We're going to be on the 12th and 13th. And so we're going to have to find some time in between the 3rd and the 4th and the 12th to come together again in executive session to plan out our questions. So those are just all those. Thanks so much to Megan for putting all of those things on our calendars. We have them on our school board calendars. But be starting to think about your questions.
Getting busy.
Yeah. Luckily, we all get along because we're going to see a lot of each other in February. So
It's a month of love.
it is a month of it. So, moving into new business, CPSC recommendations.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the committees on special education and preschool special education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thanks.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So our Haldane budget calendar we have to look at. It's a little bit different based on some thinking of Carl and Catherine about how to present this. And so I'm going to hand it over to Carl.
Sure. The only difference is you did start a little earlier in past years with a few public presentations. And speaking with Catherine, one, for example, is just looking at what we budgeted and what our actual spending is mid-year, which is helpful. But I have to, say I don't know how helpful that is in building next year's budget. To see actual spending at the end of the year when you close out your books, that of course is important. Mid-year, it's always a bit of guesswork, to be frank with you. I always started just a bit later, waiting for key information like the governor's recommended budget, look at the assembly and the senators, their recommendations, try to anticipate any major changes there, or at least know where we stand. Catherine, probably within the next couple of days, will be calculating our allowable tax levy increase. So that's a key data point that we need to understand. It's not that the budget development process is not happening. I could tell you internally, looking at Mary Ann and our principals, Regina, Josh, they've been meeting regularly and bringing in so much information. And I have to say, probably, I think as a board, some of the most valuable information you're receiving are the administrators' reports, and we do appreciate you reading them. And just take, for example, what Regina shared, the dramatic increase in responsibility for about 20 extra students that we didn't have just 6-8 years ago. I'm not saying that'll have an impact on the budget at all. But if she makes a recommendation to support that extra, responsibility, you'll understand the background of it. So we're, in speaking with Peggy and Maggie, we do meet every couple of weeks. Catherine and I just thought it's a minor adjustment. It's a little bit of a delayed start. It's consistent with most districts, but certainly, this is the board's budget development process, and we're kind of recommending maybe we try it a little differently and give you a more comprehensive first budget presentation on February 4th, and then go through the process if you've looked at the calendar. I think after we go through the process, if you prefer some of the things you did in previous years, you certainly can ask the new superintendent to go back to that structure, or if you're happy with this. And we also, another goal, there was a little bit of redundancy is from what I heard from Catherine. So that's where we come to this, adjusted schedule
Mhm.
compared to previous years. If that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I agree. I mean, some of the redundancy was an effort to communicate as much as possible about the budget that was in development. Whether or not that redundancy was just taxing for those of you that were actually developing the budget or actually useful in communicating, I don't know, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're good. So it's a recommended action. Yes, may we have a recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the Haldane Central School District 2025-2026 budget calendar as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And next we have an item for discussion, which is the proposed calendar for the 2025-26 school year. And then we would adopt this at our February 4th meeting if people, had thoughts about it. I mean, really, there's us, but so this is also the community's opportunity to, look at the calendar, it's
We usually send it out.
oh, you do.
We do. Following this draft opportunity, we send it to the
Okay.
community and ask them to look at it and let them know when the board intends to adopt it so that they can email any feedback they might have.
Oh, that's,
Mhm.
I forgot. That's great. Yes, that's what we want to do.
That's good. Yeah, the only questionable thing
Yeah.
that I had, which is completely personal, and a small section of people I've talked to in the community feel, just that week in February. Do we want that? This would be the third year, right? This budget
Yes.
that we're looking at now would be
Correct.
the third year, and
That
it's
we
sort of
brought
an
it back. Yeah.
it's sort of an adjustment. I sort of prefer the more time off around spring recess. But again, that could be, we might have more people in the community that like the ski week and
Right.
want to go.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice
Some-
to hear.
Some people like February. For a while, we had some extra time at Memorial Day.
Right.
Some people were interested in more time preceding Christmas. So it's just, give and take somewhere. Yeah.
BOCES calendar has the
That's right.
week, right? Yeah, for February.
Yes.
Yeah. Becomes a little wonky when
Well,
you
different than
when you
BOCES is
run a
hard.
different schedule than BOCES just because of the services, classes and things. One thing I did notice was we brought back, I thought we lost or we brought back, the Wednesday. I think we ran the Wednesday before Thanksgiving as a superintendent conference day one time. Did we ever do that?
For the district,
thought about it?
historically, those 3 days have been holidays
Have been
for
holidays for
as long
everybody,
as
right?
I remember.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
thinking about, we were trying to get a day back or something like that, but I thought it was great that it was just off. So that way people have that time off, which is great.
There were fewer, it seemed like this
Yeah.
coming year, there were fewer decisions to be made since a lot of it just sort of presented how it.
And so the board knows we do meet with our faculty association. They gave input into this calendar. The admin team gave input into the calendar. We certainly looked at BOCES. One shift year over year, you may have noticed, is this current school year, we started with one conference day prior to Labor Day, prior to the school year beginning. We felt pretty strongly that we need two. There are just so many requirements and trainings that it's really tough to cover them effectively in one conference day up front. So the teachers and staff would come in twice the week before school begins and then hit the ground running after Labor Day.
Which just happens to be the earliest possible.
I know.
Right? It's the earliest possible Labor Day. So
Oh, right, because it's the
it's
second.
the first.
Yeah, it's the
First,
first.
oh,
this
is it
year.
the
Yeah, that's
first?
right.
Every day's the first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for the work on that. And so now we have, I actually don't know how to say this acronym, LHRIC, the Laura Hudson Rick, is I guess how I was saying it.
Or the lyric is sometimes.
Okay,
referred.
data privacy agreement. So may we have the recommended action, please?
I'm going to do the first half. Whereas 4 BOCES have collaborated and entered into an Article 5 General Municipal Law intermunicipal arrangement for the purpose of improving vendor management and data security and privacy practices for school districts and/or BOCES statewide, known as the REC 1 Risk Operations Center. Whereas the Board of Education of the Haldane Central School District, through its affiliation with a locally based regional information center, participates with the ROC and desires for the 2024-2025 fiscal year to authorize the ROC to enter into data privacy agreements and related exhibits with vendors and third-party contractors that include the requirements of and compliance with the New York State Education Law, Section 2D, and Part 121 regulations related to student personally identifiable and certain teacher and principal APPR data. We're good there.
We have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
I should have thought to ask this in an email, but do you have any background information on this that you want to share with us?
Just a bit.
Uh-huh.
So when we purchase software or a student information system through BOCES, which we do both of those things, we basically depend on them to vet these companies to ensure that they're complying with Ed Law 2D, which is New York State law to protect privacy. It is a coincidence. We power school the system we use, and there's millions of students, internationally, that their data was compromised. It's just a coincidence that this was being developed prior to that happening. But that's a good example of why BOCES and these 4 BOCES that support probably hundreds of school districts, literally, they're working together collaboratively to ensure that all of these vendors are being held accountable for their practice with protecting student privacy and data. So that's the resolution through BOCES. We did run it by our attorneys, who said, absolutely, you purchase through BOCES, and we should support the agreement.
I mean, because New York State with this Section 2D, I guess, I'd love, 2D, they instituted very, very rigorous data privacy requirements, which they should. So
and we're just as small individuals. Even a larger district just doesn't have the capacity to really vet all of these different vendors.
Fantastic. That's great. That's great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. So our mid-year self-evaluation, right? We're just gonna do just sort of an informal, as per maybe's.
Yeah, we can just do a rundown of our goals, and hopefully it's pretty easy. Everything's spelled out. So if we just take a look at our goals, I can read goal 1 is the capital bond referendum vote and subsequent planning. So if anybody has any information on or feelings on how we've been doing that. I know that Mr. Albano gave a quick update about where we are at the moment. Established 6 groups of admin, teachers, and other stakeholders to help in the planning process. We had our first owner, architect, and contractor meeting back in December, which was talking about a lot of talk about the deadlines, overall deadlines, and a lot of talking about the paperwork and requests for proposals for various surveying projects. That's sort of the first step. So that was what we talked about in December. We have another meeting on Thursday. We, to see sort of where we are specifically. But yeah, that's where it's sort of a lot of this pre-bidding for surveys, geological surveys, hazardous material surveying, that type of thing. So that's where we are in that.
Feelings and thoughts. First of all, we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back for having, for it having been approved. But I do want to at least sort of pat leadership on the back for everything that 3 of you, in particular Maggie, that you have done to get us to this position, and all the time and energy you spend regularly overseeing it, and will continue to do so. Thank you. And professionally, I'm currently doing the same thing for another large project, and I know how enormous it is. So thank you.
Actually, I mean, honestly, I think
I know.
we could all pat ourselves on the back. Honestly, I mean, I feel like I feel like the group really came together. First of all, thank you very much for those kind words, but it was really exciting to see this, us and the community come together around the
And I echo that. You're doing a lot of the heavy lifting along with Mr. Albano and definitely with Megan.
Mm-hmm.
She
Well,
also-
the administrative team did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a terrific
That's true.
job.
But sort of
Yes.
keeping
Yeah.
everybody on knowing what to do at every single given moment, that's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, thank
Yeah,
you for
no,
that.
so many people did so much, and it's definitely a community effort. When people have said to me, "Congratulations," I always say it's a big win for the district.
Yes.
Certainly not.
For the kids, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really a big deal for the kids.
Good, okay. So our second goal, planning a district-wide STEAM program. We've heard a bit about this. I think this is the one that we're still sort of, just stepping into the waters, right? I know that the district has gone and visited, right, program?
Yes,
some
yeah,
programs,
the
so-
admin team went to Chappaqua.
Mhm.
They have model STEAM programs. We learned a lot. Not that we're trying to replicate that exactly, but we came with some good ideas. But there are 2 or 3 other school districts and programs that the subcommittee does want to visit. So, and this time we do want to include teachers, because teachers, again, speaking directly with teachers is really helpful. So this one kind of falls under the overarching, capital bond, but it is underway. The group met and they'll continue to meet all through the design phases.
So I think this is something in terms of board responsibilities that me or Peggy, in the event that we go to those OACM meetings, just to sort of make sure that we're sort of tuned into that and always checking in on that, and obviously getting the updates from the admin team that'll hopefully flesh out here. Okay. Goal 3, pre-kindergarten program planning and application submission, which so far sounds very exciting. It's one of our.
Yeah, registration is underway.
Yeah.
I don't have numbers for you, so but I anticipate you're going to have a pretty strong response, and we will do a random lottery is what we anticipate.
And when does that close? Do we know? Not to put you on the spot.
The end of March.
It's on the site.
Megan, I think.
I've definitely seen the media go out about it, so that's.
Yeah, we deliberately left it open so we could make sure we get the word out. It's new.
Yep.
Right. So.
Yep, end of March. Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, we've talked about it before, but I was so grateful to Carl for bringing his expertise and getting that off the ground. But Christine really, I think, doing so much heavy lifting around that, and it's great to be in a position where it can happen.
Yeah, hearing about it during the budget process, that'll be a piece of that going forward too. So, and last, goal 4, our superintendent search process, which is about to pick up steam. And it's kind of nice having this period where all the applications are still coming in, right? We have it posted until the 31st, I believe, and so then it gets crazy with the amount of meeting that we'll be doing, which is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit before, but the whole board, I think, coming together, right after the capital bond referendum for our retreat, and the openness and the engagement that we had. I think that was a really good way to get it started. So, and we have such good partners with Lynn Allen and Neil Boyle at PNW BOCES, and so appreciative. I mean, really a lot of people. I guess one more pitch. Thanks so much to everyone in the community who came out for the focus groups, and really, another pitch for people to fill out the survey if they haven't already. Megan, are we going to send out one more email about it before the survey?
Yeah, we might as well. Do just another reminder, sort of a last chance. That's fine.
Great.
Feels like we're on track with everything. But obviously, any feedback is good from any of our peers or anyone in the community. I'd love to, always like to hear from people.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Yes.
Well, I think that we we demonstrated real flexibility and openness to feedback we'd received from leadership, district leadership about expediting the search
Yes.
process.
Yeah,
You know, and
I know.
which
that wasn't, yeah.
wasn't easy and wasn't wasn't something that we certainly had to do. But it made a lot of sense, and I just appreciate everyone's flexibility and interest in expediting that for the obvious reasons. So
Yeah, yeah. And that was feedback and
Yeah.
it was good to get. It was,
Yeah.
it was good to get.
It's a competitive market.
Yeah.
We gotta make sure we're there.
Mhm.
Right. Well, thanks so much. I mean, we're talking about these as our mid-year self-evaluation, but it really is, obviously, all of this is such a collaboration with everyone in the district. I will say, I did not sound this sick this afternoon, so I apologize for all my hemming and hawing over here. All right, now we're at is there anything else we want to say about our mid-year evaluation? It's a big year. It's a big year for the district. It's an exciting year. So time for our second opportunity for communication from the public. And if there's nothing there, then board reflections. Anything anybody wants to add? So I'm going to move that that the board adjourns into executive session to discuss information relating to a current or future investigation. The board will take any action during the executive session. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and we'll adjourn the meeting from exec session.
Thank you.